because moving forward, there's going to be some new opportunities, but unless things change back incredibly fast, like the damage that'll be done already here is maybe it's not damage. Again, like you look at a forest fire, okay, it's damaging, but then the following subsequent years, plural, there's just an enormous amount of new life that flourishes there. From the flower to the vegetation to the bird species that come back, the insect species, that sort of thing, they just come back. And fire does also ignite some seeds to come out of their hibernation. No pun intended on the ignite, but generally there's different types of seed. Like I was talking about the winter wheat, it has to go through a certain number of freeze days sitting in the soil before it emerges in the spring. Well, same thing with fire. There's a fair species of pines out there where those seeds in the pine cones, they won't germinate until they go through a fire.
Yeah, they have
and,
to.
It's cleansing for a lot of areas, but we look at it as destructive. Really, it's just burning out the bottom undergrowth and allowing air, oxygen, sunlight to come and nourish something else. Now, if we step over into the global economic sphere of that, we've been smothered by underbrush and taxes and regulation and corruption for 100 and some years here since 1913, before that even. But if you take a look, Ransom, I'd sent you a slide with 3 different presidents going back at 100-year intervals when they did tariffs. And the whole point was they need to wait about 100 years so 3 generations forget what happened. Yeah, right there you go. So think about that for just a moment here. 1828, 1930, and 2025. The same thing with the different pandemics that had come through. You're telling me that 100-year interval that we got the Spanish flu 100 years ago, and prior to that, two intervals back, we get the Black Death. It's like every 100 years, something's coming through. It's like these 2 things seem rather coordinated to myself here on these 100-year intervals. Now, I'm not saying that the Spanish flu overlapped to the 1930 and the 28 crash, but it's really interesting how these plagues also on our planet are nearly at 100-year intervals. Tariff collapse, restructuring at nearly 100-year intervals. So what is it about that 3rd generation waiting period so everybody forgets before it happens again? Something seems amiss here. It does seem cleansing that we're getting through a lot of, shall we say, overburden that should be burned away, that's getting burnt away at the moment. But again, for those animals that are in the fire at the moment, they're trying to flee and get out of the way of the danger. Only the subsequent years do they come back when there's green, supple, vegetation growing and it's safe again. Fire's been extinguished, things are growing, there's tree canopy, flourishing food source, but that takes a year or 2. But I think we're right in the middle of the forest fire time right now. And then we're going to blaze out of here. We got to get out of the way for a minute and then come back in. But it's going to be absolutely mind altering to find the opportunities. There will be many, believe me, there will be many opportunities during this time. But how do you identify those and sort of dive into the niche? Because I was talking to the guy who helped me do the orchard yesterday, and he doesn't really have much TV either. And he was asking me, what do you think? And I told him, I think we're going to go back to sort of a bartering and trading, like empty the closet, kind of move through, wouldn't even say yard sales, but like community sales of things. And he goes, oh man, I live in that world. And I was like, dude, you are going to dominate then. If that's your waking state already and you're existing in this commerce world and that underlayer of barter and commerce already, you're absolutely going to be the king, man, of knowing how to do that when nobody else does. See, now we're going to flip the script here. Everybody knows how to use paper dollars and go buy something new in a store. That's like child's play. Now take something that's been used and give it value again, and then find a price that somebody will agree on and then give it to you in a different thing, not using money. It could be using food. It could be using labor. It could be using something else. But those people that exist in that world already as their waking state, just like I saw this movie where a disease swept through the air and made everybody go blind. But the people who were already blind they were the kings inside because they already knew how to exist in any, thrive in that environment anyway. So everybody else came in brandly new, blind, and stumbling around, banging into stuff, couldn't even make it to the bathroom or anything. But these people who had lived in that world absolutely dominated. So I'm looking at it the same way. If you're anyway and you have skills for bartering, trading, assessing value, sewing something back together, revamping something, consolidating that for sale at a different place, absolutely that's a winning strategy moving forward. I hate to use the word Great Depression-esque, but I think that supply chains are being ripped apart on purpose to bring us to a regional sort of existence anyway, and there's no way around that. That's just the way the Lima Doctrine, or the Lima Declaration, excuse me, from 1974 to 76, when they set up the protocols to move us from that period of time up to today to deindustrialize the Western nations, and then bring us to this, what we have today, to spread out the wealth, to spread out the technology across all the less developed nations of that time in the late 1960s, early 70s, early 80s, to try to spread that across the entire planet, to have them self-develop at least to a certain point. Now this will run its course. Now the next 2025 to 2050 is about deindustrialization. Everything's going to be 3D printed. What you consider bringing factories back to America, the automation there is going to be 3D printing and using AI. The people that will be in there will be the ones who either program the automation and robotics, or they'll be the ones that are servicing, or they'll be the ones that are, making sure the raw product is in place, that the manufacturing can take place. There'll be no humans inside there. And we're going to come back to regionalization again. We're definitely stepping away from anything on the global level. So this is the terror part right now. We're in the beginning of the reformation of it. Because if you lived in the 1970s into the early 80s, you saw the beginning of, NAFTA, and you saw the beginning of this moving things to cheaper places like Mexico, and then suddenly jumped over to China in the early 90s, and you heard some inklings of stuff in Indonesia and China. You saw that movement slowly, and bam, like Andy Scheckman always says, slowly, 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 and then all at once. Little by little, and then all at once. Well, that was the same thing that we saw. It was like little by little in the mid 90s, and then boom, everything was in China by 2000, 2005. Man, there was nothing left. That stuff even got hoovered over there from Mexico. It all got sucked over to Asia. And this is the same thing. It's like little by little, and all at once is beginning to happen. It's going to shift, rift, break, crack, and get smashed into 1,000 pieces. So where's your opportunity in that? That's the whole thing. Don't look at it as something bad happening. Look at it as a reformation and a possibility to reinvent yourself. So where do you find the value in that, Ransom? Like, walk me through that world here. I'm all ears.
It was funny. I was just watching that Ross Perot speech about, why wouldn't we build stuff other places if I have to pay health care and, life insurance and all this other stuff to just make a product? I'll just go to Mexico. That's that giant sucking sound. Remember that? He was talking about that. Yeah, that made me think of that a lot.
Yeah, I remember there's a lot of wisdom in a few of the outliers that are, there was some such wisdom in the people who are outside the political circle that really wanted economic change.
Oops. Sorry, messed up all my buttons. No, I was just thinking that despite, like we were talking with Nyquist kind of about, I'm a little different on the opinion that I don't think we need more than we want workers from all over the world. I think that there's been, he was right in one way where he was talking about everybody becoming soft generationally. And, like you have the great generation, then they have the boomers, then they have Gen X, and Gen X, learned a bunch of stuff from the great generation because that's their grandparents. Unfortunately for the millennials, the boomers were their grandparents, and the boomers really had everything handed to them. Their parents worked to the bone. They fought a world war. They lived through, massive hard times with the Great Depression, the Dust Bowl, all of that stuff was in their childhoods and them growing up. So they didn't complain about nothing. They just, as they say, pulled themselves up by the bootstrap and just accomplished everything. They painted their house. They fixed it if they need carpentry. They knew how to do stonemasonry. They knew how to work on their car. They knew how to farm their land. They knew how to work on the tractor. They knew how to invent stuff. I mean, a lot of the inventions that we enjoy later came out of that generation as well. And, you know, now all of that's gone. Unfortunately, it's sad. You know, mama, papa, peepaw, and all of that stuff have left the world. And thank God that they gave a lot of that information to some people. So unfortunately for the youth, there is an opportunity. And I say unfortunately because, you know, that means they have to get out of the house, get out of the air conditioning, stop playing the video games, stop looking at the social media, stop watching porn, stop doing all of these destructive, time-consuming things that were just given to them as children. And now they're adults and they are soft. They don't know what it's like to sit out in the blistering sun. Now, some poor people do. And yes, those immigrants do because they came from their country where they were still doing it. And then they come over here and what happens? Everybody whines because they're the guy getting $20, $30 an hour to create, fix, and build stuff. Now, I say unfortunately because they're going to have to get rid of that soft lifestyle and learn a trade, learn 2 trades, learn 3 trades. Teach your children those trades. You can take back the workforce in a really small amount of time, less than a decade. I think that we could recover from, you know, any loss of workers and be the main workforce again. It's just people are going to have to get over that soft lifestyle and realize that to be able to have something, you have to make it. And to make it, you have to spend the time doing it and learning how to do it. The problem is the corporations have been working against this idea for some time, and they still are. And I know that their end result game plan is to replace that workforce, at least with all the tedious factory jobs, fast food jobs, really low skilled jobs that are monotonous, all going to be robot. But it's not going to be able to fix the drain in your sink. It's not going to be able to, fix your house and do things that we do that we still know how to do. That's way far off. Now, killing machines, transportation, and things like that, they're there. They're there so much more that you have the president, I don't know, maybe you could say it's a bluff, but think about what we were talking about with Nyquist last week, where he brought up, unless we're sandbagging, and then you have other analysts out there saying, no, we have good stuff. We've saved it back. And it does make sense because if you realize our weapon sales over the past 30 years from the 90s to now, we sold everybody all the old stuff, all the, F4 Phantoms and the F-16s. They have that. That's all the old stuff. And even our stealth junk that we're, supposed to be top of the line stuff is old junk. So I kind of believe Trump when he says, we have weapons that no one even know how it works or seen it before. That tells me that they are prepared to fundamentally transform the reality of this planet. I think what they're doing is waiting for China to do something to become a boogeyman better than they are now, like to invade something, to do anything that we could use for an excuse to accelerate the future. And then, like you said, it'll all happen at once. All the factories will start up. All the wars will start. All of these new ideas will just be reality one day when you woke up. Not like yesterday. And for Gen X, that's happened several times to us. So we know that it can happen again. Just you wake up one day and they tell you that the world's changed and it's not going back. 9/11 was one of those moments that everybody didn't even realize the gravity of what happened. No pun intended with the free fall stuff going on. But there was a major transformation of wealth. There was a realignment of nations. There was plans to draw up new borders. And now we're at the end of that stage of the program. And we're getting to see what the next program is. And I have a feeling that it is the trilateral style world government. And I think all the players are participating in the grand final idea, but they're going to fight over who gets better circumstances in that new world. And I think that's what's going to happen. We're about to bomb a few countries, do some major trade reorganization. And this thing with China, we can cripple them. We don't need that crap. The stuff that we buy from them is just not really necessary.
There are few things you can count on in a major disaster. Having your water supply cut off is one of them. With the Alexa Pure Emergency Water Bank, you'll have months of drinking water in your home. Everyone else will stand in line waiting to get just a few bottles. It's one of the easiest, most affordable ways to store emergency water, and it takes up hardly any space. The Alexa Pure Emergency Water Bank includes 1 BPA-free liner, comes with a siphon pump for extracting water, fits just about any bathtub, large or small, fills quickly in 30 minutes or less, holds up to 65 gallons of water, and keeps water fresh for up to 16 weeks, holds about 2 months of water for one person. A person can generally survive without water for about 3 days. However, the exact amount of time depends on many factors, including age, activity level, and overall health. Don't gamble with your life and well-being. Being prepared is easier than ever with Civilization, Cycle, and Alexa Pure.
Everybody got sold on the comfort, softness of capitalism and being able to buy a product and have it delivered to their front door. And what happens to most of that Amazon stuff? It lasts for a year. You put it on a shelf, you resell it. I mean, it's not like we can't survive without trinkets. We can. And in fact, everybody has for millions of years up until now, where we've become the softest civilization to date. I mean, physically, mentally, and, as far as power of having individual property, wealth, and knowledge to back up our lifestyle.
Yeah, the old cement pond grandma kind of lifestyle from the Beverly Hillbillies, like the old timers. Even out here in East Tennessee, the old timers are really not as many as there used to be. But you can tell they operate differently. If you can find a couple of the eldest, they'd be in their 90s by now out here, late 90s, early 90s, somewhere around there. They run on a different kind of machinery in their mind and body. Because everybody was always moving and walking. They look at these blue zones where they live to be over 100 generally. One thing that was unanimous across all of them was continuous motion. The diet could vary from place to place, but one thing that was always unanimous was these people never stopped moving. They never became sedentary. They always kept. And so when you look and you find somebody who's 95 still cruising around, they were the ones who were out in the gardens. They never stopped moving. So, that's another key to longevity. Do not stop moving. You got to get out and keep moving around, walking, using your body every day, whatever it is, bending over, a lot of, planting gardens, even soft work like that, being out in the sun, doing any kind of work to keep that body moving up and down, side to side, walking, the legs, joints, this sort of thing. And it's crazy how many people have joint problems these days comparatively to the elders. I'm just wondering why more people today have many more joint problems than had been previously, because it just seems something is different. Whatever it is different, absolutely, in terms of the physiology and how hardy it could be and the withstanding of things that would break other people. They're just like, gingerly hopscotching through that, send others to tears in terms of what they would have to endure. Hey, if you're still planting the food and you don't have any way to plant, I don't care if it's still dark, you go out there and work with candles or whatever until the planting's done. You come in at 11 o'clock, you can't complain because you're still, and that's the way it used to be. Nobody stopped until the work was done. Like today, it's just 5, I'm already off. Or no, it's getting near sunset, I got to go in already. The whole mind frame of getting work done or not getting it done is going to change too. Because, there's two things here. You were talking about, like Taiwan's another one that is forced to buy, and I'll absolutely say that. They're forced to buy an enormous amount of outdated junk weapons in order to get the protection from the States. Everybody in Taiwan knows it, that they're getting old junk. But buying that old junk assures them some sort of, protection, quote unquote, because they're at that, that first chain of islands there. But China's in its own conundrum as well right now. So they're going to have only a couple of choices. And you've already seen one of them is to hyperinflate and just like print like crazy to stop their stock markets from falling over there. Because if the unemployment rolls through all those factory lines, you have to realize the amount of men that are there that will be unemployed with nothing, getting angry by the day, they have to redirect them. Hundreds of millions of them. Now, the way that they could, redirect that anger before, or that animosity, or even not being able to climb a ladder or afford a house, and a lot of the same issues we're experiencing here with the younger generation, is they kept giving them jobs in these giant factory zones and guaranteed them, like, you get free housing, you get free food in these areas, you make money every month, you can send it home to the family, and then everything works as it did before, because that's just part of the tradition. Men work, they send money home. Women work, they send money back to the family, to the elders in the family. So what happens when the factories start closing across China, but you have 100,000 people that work in a factory, or 50,000 or 20,000, doesn't matter. Where do all these people go and go to work? They don't. They were already having a demographic nightmare anyway for unemployment of even those with PhDs that would be working the equivalent in a restaurant or a McDonald's with a PhD. So saturated the job market, because their whole promise was the more you work, the more you study, the harder you work, the more courses you take, stacked to the Himalaya of like diploma things, and you still can't get a job. So that whole thing of teasing a generation to study to infinitum to get that higher job, that's gone. Everybody understands it. Master degree, you don't have a chance. You got to have a PhD to even be in the line that's 1,000 deep to be able to be considered. Or you go to work in a factory or some kind of very low level job, and people do that. They don't give up and quit and go, I'm not going to work. But now, where do you reshuffle all those people who've already taken that step backward, that the social contract was already broken at some point? The only thing is, in China, you just can't complain. You complain, you disappear. Because at the time, there was only a few complaining compared to the masses who were, employed everywhere. But now you're going to have this tidal wave of hundreds. I'm talking 100, 200 million unemployed at the same time, getting agitated. So China's in quite the conundrum. Their economy is in collapse. They had to pump the most money they've ever printed. They had to devalue their currency to the lowest ever, at least on the foreign exchange traded market, not the actual exchange rate in China. Because when I traveled there, and I was studying there in 2002, 2003, somewhere, it was like 7.8 renminbi to a dollar. Like the Forex float outside is somewhere around 7.6 now. So it never got really ultimately the lowest, where it was 7.8 when I was there way back, 20 plus years ago. But it's getting close. So they're devaluing their currency to make it cheaper, so people want to buy more stuff because it's cheaper. It doesn't cost as much. You can buy more of their junk for less price. They're enticing people by lowering the price of the goods by devaluing their currency. But at the same time, the central bank has just absolutely just turned the money printer on to like 1,000x and add extra grease into the cogs and let it run even faster. Full steam, some kind of like a Bugs Bunny, Wile E. Coyote kind of crazy, where the steam engine's pumping. It's almost gonna, like the bolts are coming across, every puff of the engine on the gears, and the sort of boom, boom, you can see it. That's just exactly what their money printers are like now. It can't even go a fifth of an eighth, hardly longer, before China's gonna absolutely implode in some way economically. And when that happens, and those factories, like Amazon stopping all deliveries to America, absolutely just, I can't even believe it. Being in China would be very terrifying right now if you were a business owner or the government itself. They realize they just got cut off, and all those societal problems are going to sweep back. It's like it's like a 10.0 earthquake happened offshore. And suddenly now that giant tsunami is coming back, and they can see it from the beach. That's what's happening right now.